Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 196th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And this month's theme is all about anxiety linked to the climate crisis. But before you carry on with today's show, I wanted to ask you, have you watched my TEDx talk about the connection between culture, race, and mental health? It's something you can watch in your break, as it's just 12 minutes long, and the link is in the show notes, but I'll also give it to you here. It's bit.ly/TEDx Wolves, that's TEDx WOLVESLO. I hope you enjoy it. It was a labor of love. And if you do enjoy it, please leave a positive comment on YouTube, share, and like. And equally, if you enjoy this podcast episode, please leave a review on your podcast platform where you listen to your podcast from and share with your friends too. Right, so we have Mental Health Awareness Week was 15th to 22nd of May, and actually May is often Mental Health Awareness Month. And this year's theme from the Mental Health Foundation has been anxiety. And if you've listened to the series, starting from episode 193 to this one, I've been talking about anxiety and climate change. So please do check out those episodes, especially the ones with Jelly May Moring and the brilliant Irene Owusu from Kenya. That one's episode 195. The one with Jelly May Moring is episode 194, where we talk about the climate crisis from a global majority perspective, climate justice, and what we can do. And the thing that kept coming back to me was this idea of divestment, specifically around pension investments. And so I wanted to delve into this more to see what is the connection with divestment and mental health, and can we flip it from mental ill health to creating healthier investments that enhance mental well-being. So firstly, let's just define this word divestment. So if we think about the purely financial term, divestment is defined as the process of selling subsidiary assets, investments, or divisions of a company in order to maximize the value of the parent company, also known as divestiture. Divestment is effectively the opposite of an investment and is usually done when that subsidiary asset or division is not performing up to expectations. So in essence, divestment is the opposite of investment. Now, when we put an environmental lens on it, divestment means getting rid of assets that are invested in companies that are extracting fossil fuels as sources of energy and contributing directly to climate change, climate chaos, and climate injustice. So it's the removal of investment capital from stocks, bonds, or funds. And this global movement for fossil fuel divestment, sometimes also called disinvestment, is asking institutions to move their money out of oil, coal, and gas companies for both moral and financial reasons. And institutions include a wide variety of places. So universities, and many universities have divested, religious institutions, pension funds, local authorities, charitable foundations, as well as what we think of, big corporate companies that are investing on the stock market and are public companies. So apparently, this is the fastest growing area of divestment campaign in history. I think if we really put our heads together, and I'm taking this from a Guardian article that was written in 2015, and the link is in the show notes, said that it could really damage the coal, gas, and oil companies. We haven't really seen that, I think, as much as we could have done. So previous divestment campaigns you might have heard are around tobacco and gambling industries, and indeed many universities have divested completely from tobacco, and that happened a while ago. And companies funding, for example, violence in Darfur, arms trade, etc. And we know that divestment and boycotts were what really brought apartheid South Africa to its knees. So it does really work. So it was known for its fight against apartheid in South Africa. So almost all of the arguments in favor of divestment from fossil fuel will fit into the moral and the financial. But today I'm going to be talking about divestment and mental health, which of course does link into the moral case. So I really hope you're enjoying the content of this podcast and you want to keep up to date. If so, why not join my bi-monthly newsletter? When you join, you'll receive a free copy of my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leader. And the link to join is bit.ly/DMMCHSU. And the link, of course, is in the show notes. So as I was delving into this topic, it's quite interesting, actually, if you type in divestment and mental health or environmental divestment and mental health, what comes up. And it kind of was a bit of a rabbit trail. And I found this great article published in the Daily Princetonian on this very topic. And in fact, the author, I really want to credit her because she's written a brilliant article, Emily Santos, and it was published on the 5th of May 2022. And at the time, she was a first-year contributing columnist, actually from the UK, from London. And if you have a look on that story, the link is in the show notes. You can find her Instagram on there as well. Really, really brilliant piece. And essentially what they talk about in this Daily Princetonian article is that the world is facing a global health crisis. There's just a transition just about from the COVID lockdowns. We knew that there was the threat of global warming, climate change, climate chaos, climate justice issue, and the fact that the university, all universities, but clearly this is an article for Princeton about Princeton, was talking specifically about the students' body's expectations and pressures of academic success and unrealistic expectations around achievement, and that Princeton claimed to support student mental health, yet the university's board of trustees continue to confirm that divesting from investment into companies associated with the use and production of fossil fuel was not Princeton's priority at the time. And so I just want to read a paragraph from this article because I think it's so powerful, and I want to credit that again. And please do remember that the link is in the show notes. I am crediting this piece of work. So the irony of supporting mental health in a dying world seems lost on the people elected to make the most difficult decisions. In the same way, it's ignored by university officials. Curing depression and anxiety is essentially impossible in the context of a global climate emergency and the constant reminder that the earth is dying and that we will too. As quote unquote, the leaders of the future, young people understand too well the desperation to change world leaders' perspectives before our situation becomes irreversible. So super powerful, and do check out that piece because it has so much in it. So I also came across an article from the American Psychiatric Association, and it's about the divestment of fossil fuels and a piece about divestment in fossil fuels, a preventative public health strategy. And the American Psychiatric Association, APA, has recognized the profound effects of climate change on mental health. And in March 2017, the APA adopted a position paper on climate change and mental health, which is the official stance guiding the organization's actions and activity. And it talks about the growing number of health professionals who have expressed deep concern, wanting to know about how do we effectively respond and talk about with patients and the general public and policy advocacy, this idea of climate change, climate injustice, the climate crisis, and how this impacts mental health in the public space. And then in February 2020, the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the UK went fossil free, and they have a really brilliant position statement. And again, the link is in the show notes. So I've taken a paragraph from the position statement because I thought this was really, really helpful, that increasing rates of climate-related hazards are exacerbating existing mental health problems and leading to psychological distress and the onset of new episodes of mental illness. And they quote a paper from Beaglehole et al. 2018, which I'm going to come back to. As healthcare professionals, part of our response must involve advocating for our patient groups, as people with mental illness are especially vulnerable. We therefore need to champion a model of mental health care that is proactive and preventative rather than reactive. Our role in joining other health professionals to demand action on the climate and ecological emergency is non-negotiable. And the Beaglehole paper, in summary, found that, of course, when there are natural disaster incidents that are probably a result of too much human meddling, intervention, not respecting the environment and climate, of course, it leads to increased PTSD and psychological distress. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? If your home's been flooded, if you've witnessed fires, if it's, that is going to impact, especially if you've been campaigning against this, and then certain decisions are made against your community and your area that you live in. And then an Al Jazeera article, again, all the links are in the show notes, talked about psychiatrist Dr. Lise van Susteren. And this is an issue that she's been studying for more than a decade. And in 2012, she actually co-authored one of the earliest major reports on climate change and mental health published by the National Wildlife Federation in the US. And it talks about the fact that rising temperatures and heat waves are completely devastating. Of course, they're going to be increased to link rates of suicide and violence because, of course, when a natural disaster happens, how do you rebuild? There's stories about looting. They don't have insurance in many parts of the global south, but it's not always because of poverty. It's because of the way that systems have been set up. And we also always have to acknowledge the legacy of colonialism, which Irene talks about in last week's podcast episode. And so this devastation, and the social and economic upheaval of this climate change, of course, is going to cause a range of psychological harm, from acute stress to more chronic responses to trauma. So she talks about this in the article. And there is indeed a climate psychiatry alliance focused on climate instability, and it's They talk about the fact that it's one of the most urgent public health threats of the 21st century. Again, I've included their website in the show notes, and through research I found this, but yes, I didn't know about this. So this is a real eye-opener for me. And the idea of the aim of the Climate Psychiatry Alliance, it creates and promotes resources to educate the public and other mental health professionals about the mental health impacts of climate change and advocates as a group to mitigate these effects. So, of course, if we go back to thinking about climate justice, ensuring representation, inclusion, protection of the rights of the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change, we have to think about solutions that promote equity, ensure access to basic resources, and ensure that young people can live, learn, play, and work in healthy and clean environments. Divestment is essential. Making sure our money is not jeopardizing the lives of global majority children and people around the world where the global north can't see it. Because, of course, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And in fact, last summer, as you'll probably recall, there were fires in Southeast London, which, due to the hot temperatures, which I don't know if we've ever seen in recent last 100 years history. So it is on our doorstep too. And just because we can't see it daily, because we might be in the global north, and yes, it rains lots, and but again, that's part of the changes in climate that's happened on a very rapid level due to what's been going on. So absolute climate emergency. So I'd really love to know, what's your workplace doing about this? Have you had discussions about pension investments? Have you had discussions about ethical investments? If there have been workshops on money, if you think about mental health and money, thinking about our own mental well-being, but that of other people, how we can hold companies to account in terms of shipping miles, air miles, carbon offsetting, all those sorts of things. This is all part of the bigger picture. So there is significant evidence that demonstrates that mental ill health and the climate emergency, crisis, and injustice are interlinked. Divestment is a key part of shifting the balance and holding companies accountable for their actions. Mental health professionals and psychiatry have a role to play within this too. How do we start the discussion? How do we look at the impact of climate, crisis, emergency, injustice on people's mental ill health experiences and also their recovery journey? Remember to ask questions of your pension providers and make sure your money is and can be invested in an ethical way. So I really hope you found this series on anxiety and climate change useful and illuminating. I certainly have learned so much through the research and conversations during this series. And join me next week, where I'm going to be talking about building your personal brand in the workplace, particularly as a global majority staff member, and how to leverage your culture. So if you enjoyed this episode, please, why not leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget all the resources in the show notes. And I wish you all the best. And please do get in touch. Let me know what you thought. Any other topics you want to hear about, I'll be doing the podcast planning quite soon at the end of July. And I'd love to hear from you. Until then, everyone, take care. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.